Welcome to the Tuesday, June 4th, 2013 budget meeting, where today we'll speak about Board of Health, Housing and Building, and the airport. First, we'll start with Health Division, page 40. FY14 requested for, I'm looking at page 39, Councilors, just for the whole Board of Health. Total health requested, personal services, $378,975, mayoral approval, $384,025, and total health expenses, $55,020, and mayoral approval, $53,830. And now we'll go to page 40 for health. Director Curry, do you wish to make any statements before we begin?
I do not. I'll entertain questions if councilors wish to have. Now, usually I give an update of the years, the past year. Due to time constraints, I'd be glad to send that via email so you folks can read it that
Questions? Thank you. Sorry. Questions on page 40? Councilor Hay?
All the personal services increases, those are all contractual, Steve?
They are.
Thank you.
Councilor Bean?
Director, I see you depend a lot on CDBG funds, and
There's actually 3 grants, Councilor.
okay, but the CDBG
Yes, there is a
grants-
dependence on CDBG.
Right. There's been talk of cuts in that. Do we know any updates on that? I mean, I've seen some alerts in that, but to expect cuts, do we know what the final number is going to be?
I believe
How is that gonna
the
affect
final
us?
numbers have been worked out, and we have been cut already on the building side, but not the health side.
Okay. And your other grants are from?
The other grants are labeled here. DIG grant is the regionalization grant, which includes the part-time nurse and the part-time inspector.
that last meeting,
And the SMRP grant is the Sustainable Materials Recovery Project grant, which is a DEP grant for 2 part-time recycling coordinators. There are quite a few steps that need to be taken before those positions are hired. But those are new positions.
Are these one-year grants or multi-year
They
grants?
would be 1-year grants, yes.
And then after that, we're responsible for picking these people?
Well, they'd be part-time employees, so we either
See.
pick up the tab or we release.
Thank you.
Councilor Hay?
My question had to do with the SMRP grant, which was answered.
Any other questions on page 40? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 41, Housing Division. Total housing requested FY14, $21,402. Mayoral approval, $16,052. And here to speak on that is Director McNutt.
I don't have any statements. I can entertain questions.
Any questions for these gentlemen on page 41? Councilor Hay?
The increases in personal services, those are all negotiated?
Yes.
Any other questions on 41? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 43, Public Health Nurse. Public Health Nurse requested $125,213. Requested, mayoral approved, $125,213. Any questions on page 43? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 45, Rubbish Collection and Disposal. FY14 requested. Lost my spot here, sorry. Where is the total? Okay, sorry. Total requested $2,075,000. Mayoral approved $2,010,000. Any questions on page 45? Councilor Hay.
Steve, 13 projected is $1,875,000. Requested for 14 is $2,075,000. That's a pretty steep jump. What's happening?
Councilors, per our 1992 solid waste contract, It was listed in the contract that the city is required to pay for recycling disposal. Since that time, the city has never done so. Waste Management is interested in enforcing that part of the contract.
Is Waste Management's decision to, after 21 years, stick to the rules of that contract regarding the recycling, have anything to do with the city's changing in our recycling and trash programs?
I suspect that, as we know, recycling has doubled, or more than doubled. I suspect that had a lot to do with it, yes. But they, if I may add, that Waste Management is also interested in renegotiating and amending that contract so that there are commodities or so kickbacks for the two incentive. The point is if we're paying for it, what's the incentive now? We still will not pay for the trucking portion of recycling, only the disposal. But we plan to amend that contract to incentivize, make it worthwhile for the city to continue enforcement of recycling.
When the recycling and trash program was brought before us, and we were given numbers and shown costs and savings, an increase in this was never mentioned
Correct.
to us.
It was presented to me as Waste Management was audited.
So, but I'm just getting at, when it was put before us and the information we used, I would still vote for it, Steve. I think it's a good program, and I think it's working right, and I think it was the correct thing to do. But realistically, we weren't given all the information and all the numbers regarding this increase, because this increase offsets some other stuff.
Correct. And I did sell the program to you that we are not paying for disposal of recycling. It wasn't my intent to deceive you, but it was a fact.
Okay,
We were not paying.
but that is
for it.
why we have this increase.
That is
Thank you.
correct.
Councilor Caddy?
So if people stop recycling and throw their recyclables in the trash, then we won't be paying for the recyclables.
No, actually, the rate, according to the contract, it's the same rate disposal cost as trash. And it's been that way since 1992. They just never charged. So, the way the contract's written, trash and recycling is the same cost to dispose of. Right now, presently, there's a benefit to taking your recycling out of the trash. With the way the contract was written in 1992, there is no benefit to it.
Yeah,
However, there will be a benefit once we renegotiate the contract, the 92 contract, to receive recycling kickbacks.
that would have been an argument before they just assessed us. That would have been an argument. Now it's probably a wash. What's the difference, 300,000?
The recycling charge is going to be about $100,000 annually. In previous years, it probably would have only been about $20,000 to $30,000 because we only had a 9% recycling rate, with about 1,200 tons produced annually by curbside residents. Now our numbers are over 3,000 tons, so we essentially would be paying $40 a ton for 3,000 tons of recycling, which would be the same for trash, according to the contract. Previous years, we produced 15,000 tons of trash curbside. Now we're around 10 to 11,000.
And there's no legal argument that past practice, they haven't charged us? And now, all of a
rather
sudden,
than-
because our program is successful, we're being charged?
Rather than chase it legally, I chose to attempt to renegotiate it, and they were agreed that it takes away the incentive to recycle, and that incentive needs to be there. So they are willing to formulate some sort of equation to give the city of Fitchburg back. I don't know what those numbers are yet. They're still working on calculations, but to incentivize recycling. so that the city benefits from it.
Well, I hope that they do, because that was the
That was the
reason.
goal.
That was the goal to begin with.
Right.
Thanks.
I would like to make a recommendation that we cut contract fees by $125,000 and contract services by $35,000. And I will state why. Doing an analysis of the last 6 years, our average spend in that account for contract fees is $1,070,000. This year, we've spent $1,093,000 with a projected spend, if you go through the monthly spend rate, up to about $1.2 million. This account is overfunded by $275,000. And it's overfunded by $400,000 in the last 6-year average. So now that we just heard that it's going to be $100,000 more because Waste Management suddenly woke up and needs to find extra money, that cut also has a 5% increase in the other side of the equation. The spending on this account has gone up by 5% a year. So with a $125,000 cut, this would still leave a 5% increase on the non-recyclable expenses, plus the $100,000 it would cost for recyclable expenses. This is one account, whether the director is going to agree or disagree, because I don't lay this on him, I lay this on the mayor. This account's way overfunded. That's just my opinion. And the data supports that. So I am recommending that we consider a $125,000 cut. The $35,000 cut out of contract services, even with that cut, it's still $30,000 more than what was budgeted this year. And this account this year is at $350,000, with a projected spend up to about $380,000. So even with the cut, there's still $120,000 more in that account than what they're spending this year. So that's why I've been very rigid with these cut recommendations, because even with these cuts, there is still a ton more money in these accounts than what has been spent. And I could be a real pain and say, cut that down to another $100,000, which I'd love to do, but baby steps for me. But just so everybody's clear from day one, they're big cuts, but put it in context, it is still a lot more than what's being utilized. So it's not like we're squeezing, in my opinion. So I'd like those on the table.
May I comment?
Absolutely.
Councilors, I'd like to, I understand what the status E shows, and it does show a considerable amount of money. However, April, May, and June are not in that status E. So there's still 3 months that are not recorded. A $125,000 cut on contracted fees. I admit that these numbers are a bit inflated. I was forced to make these projections on a brand-new program in December. The numbers that I was working with were 4 months, basically October numbers. These are projections. The $1,475 can be reduced, but it cannot be reduced $125,000 without affecting services. And those services would force us to cut yard waste collection weeks, or even drastically further bulk item pickup.
So a 5% increase over last year, plus
5% increase is contract.
right?
I did do some calculations, and honestly, I could say that the contracted fees could survive without cuts, with a $50,000 cut. And I will be completely honest with you. But any lower than that, on contracted fees, there'll be cuts. It'll affect services.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Curry.
Maybe we discuss contracted services disposal?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I have, per the mayor, we have discussed that. Again, I made these numbers back in October, or December, with October numbers, so I was conservative. As you'll see, I requested $600,000 initially. We already cut that down to $535,000. That is my estimation, approximately a little under 11,000 tons collected at curbside, which will cost us about $435,000, plus recycling cost. I'm estimating 2,500 tons of recycling. We're already over that. Presently, right now, I request $100,000 there. That's how I get the 535 number. Any further cuts, I will definitely be back before the council. At $500,000, it's tight.
Can you explain to me how 500,000 is tight when you're not even going to spend 400,000 this year?
Because there'll be a recycling charge, Counselor.
That's not in the contract fees, or is it a
That
double
has
hit?
never been there. You don't see that. This FY14 is the first time that charge is
In
been
contract
there.
services or
If might I
contract
add,
fees?
last year, we cut 130,000 out of it. I will admit that the program worked better than I projected at 470. It's probably going to come in around 430, 435. I'm willing to bring it down to 435 and now implement the recycling charge at an estimated $100,000. It'll be the first time I have a charge. I'm making a projection.
I guess I'm getting confused here. So is the $100,000 going to impact contract fees or contract services?
We're now talking about contract services.
Right.
That is the disposal cost, what it costs for us to throw away trash in a landfill.
That's the 100,000 impact.
Correct.
The contract fees was not a $100,000 impact?
Correct.
Okay.
It does have an increase per contract.
I will take away the 35,000 contract services from me, and I'll just keep it at 125 for the contract fees. Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Move on to airport, page 56 and 57. Airport, FY14 requested $948,188 expenses. Revenues, $948,188 for a total surplus deficit of zero. Mayoral approved, $948,188 for revenue, $948,188 for expenses, for an impact of zero, surplus/deficit. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hi, good evening.
Oh, can we have your names, please, gentlemen? for the record?
I'm Joe Posnick. I'm chairman of the Airport Commission. This is Scott Ellis. He is our acting manager of the airport.
Counselor Hay?
Hi, guys. Just a question on acting manager. When did you assume that position?
November 6th.
November 6th. Are they in the process of, is the board in the process of finalizing?
Yes. We expect to do that this summer.
Expect to finalize this particular individual or finalize an individual in the position?
Well, our hope is to finalize Mr. Ellis as the ultimate candidate for the job.
Okay. Under your, is that department head?
That would be correct.
Thank you.
Any other
If
questions?
I may, let me give you just a real quick recap of the budget. As you know, generally speaking, our budget is kind of made up of a couple of components. Right on the revenue side, we basically get money from, fuel sales, rents, and some nominal other miscellaneous revenue sources, events, et cetera, fees. On the expense side, it's primarily fuel and people, right? So as we're looking at the budget, moving things forward, we're looking to obviously try and restructure the airport and move things along. There are some incremental costs in this year's budget in terms of city services, so we've increased city reimbursement to the city for expenses by $10,000. We've also got some money in the budget for an anticipated loan. We had presented to the capital committee last fall, self-serve fuel system on the airport, and so we're looking to kind of pay that back and kind of transition some of the labor that's related to pumping fuel. We've also got, that was in tonight's city council meeting, an order on navigation easements. So as we continue to move the airport forward in terms of getting the reconstruction of the main runway 1432, it's the next phase of the program, and again, the funding for that is in the budget as well. So everything is kind of net zero into the next year.
Counselor Caddy?
Yeah, how accurate are the figures that you have before us? And the reason I'm going to ask you that question, so don't answer it till I make my point.
Go ahead.
Snow removal charges, FY8, 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, 13, exactly $9,000. That's impossible. So why aren't the actuals the actuals?
Those are the actuals. What that represents is a charge to our tenants for services that we provide them. So we fix a contract rate and charge them kind of a flat fee for clearing of snow over a season. And again, depending on the winter, some years it's heavy, some years it's light. This year was heavy, the prior year was light. So that's why it's kind of a fixed fee. That's revenue that we
Okay.
get from the tenant.
All right, thank you.
Counselor Hay?
Under the personal services, I
Yep.
assume increases are negotiated by contracts? And I'm seeing, are we going to a part-time position on the assistant?
We're looking to right-size the job. Basically, we're looking at scope of work. And we're looking to fund the job based on scope of work.
Thank you.
Counselor Bean?
Someone that uses the airport, and not enough, though. I wish I could be...
I would like to see you flying your ultralight.
Yeah.
Buy some more
I want to say
fuel
that
from us,
the operations at the airport have improved over some concerns we had in the past. I think they're a leaner, meaner operation. There were some concerns in the past about accounts receivables, people not paying their bills. I see now that you have a finance charge, you're being more proactive on getting money in on time, and I just want to say that, it's the business-like atmosphere we'd like down there, and I just want to say I appreciate the operations and how it's working.
Appreciate
The
that.
airport's a great asset, not only for the business community, but also for the general population.
We like to
Many
think so.
nights I come down and you see families watching, and I did it as a child. I did, just go down and just watch planes take off and that, so it's,
They had planes then?
the Wright brothers, it was the Wright brothers, but we did. But it's a great asset, and
On that note, in December, we had along with the Fitchburg Pilots Association, organized a Toys for Tots event with the United States Marine Corps, and we were expecting 200 or 300 people, and we got over 1,000. Last weekend, we had our open house, and we had roughly 417 people come down, look at the aircraft, they take tours of the airport, and that's also a yearly event that has a pretty good turnout.
And the end of this month is a great event. So the Fitchburg Pilots Association and the EAA chapter, they're bringing in a Ford Tri-Motor, and it's going to be on site for 3 days. So it'll be a really nice vintage airplane, that'll be on the airport and
For those of
doing
you
tours and rides and things
For
like that.
those of you who don't know, Ford Tri-Motor was basically the first airliner ever created. The particular model we have is a 1929 model, and come on down, see it. They're going to be offering tours and pictures.
Counselor Hay?
Yeah, just one extra thing that they didn't mention was with the hurricane.
Hurricane relief?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The Pilots Association in the airport did a bang-up job 2 separate times, filling, 15, 18, 20 planes.
It was 38 sorties over 2 different operations.
Okay, yep. And flying supplies down to New Jersey, and they should be commended for that.
Thank you. You pass that along.
Counselor Tran?
The expense for reimbursement for city-related costs has been $40,000 for 6 years.
Yep.
Now suddenly it's gone up by more than $27,000.
It's made up of 2 components. So this year, there was a $10,000 bump in the base rate, and then there's an additional $17,500 that was included in the budget, and that was a reimbursement to the city for an anticipated loan for the self-serve fuel system.
And are we expected that amount to become constant from now on?
I would expect next year it would probably increase more, a little bit more. So if you think about the 17.5, that's a half-year rate. So I would expect that probably to double, because again, that's mostly a debt repayment to the city by the airport.
Also, it's clothing allowance has doubled.
That's for
You're
the
requesting a
staff.
double?
That is for the staff, and it does vary by year. It may be a little high at this point, and it may not actually double.
Certain years we'll get reimbursed from our fuel supplier. We put their logo on the sleeve,
So it's
and they
advertising.
pay for half of our clothing budget for the year.
Thank you.
And that's common practice in most airports.
My question is, like the other enterprise accounts, aviation fuel and oil, $530,000.
Yep.
This year so far, we've spent $350.
It's kind of a crystal ball.
We have 1 month to go.
Yep.
So
So
why
basi-
530?
Well, basically, when we do it, we look at a couple of aspects of it. We try and, as we say, take the crystal ball out, look at where we think we're going to spend volume-wise, as well as then price-wise. So we're trying to forecast 2 uncertain elements of the marketplace, rather than coming back to the council for additional money in the budget. What the airport had traditionally done in the past is kind of looked at their volume, looked at their trends, think about what we anticipate we might spend, as well as then try and think about where the market might go for fuel price. The market is very volatile. It is not uncommon for us to get 50, 60, 70, 80 cent swings in a season.
Thank you.
So part of that is, because that goes up, then that drives revenue up. So that's where you get correlation of that. So it's about a 30% markup between the base cost and the revenue.
How is the airport doing? I mean, surplus deficit-wise?
They're doing well. A year ago or 2 years
Years
ago,
ago, we were
there was a
70 in the hole.
deficit of 70,000 at year end, and last year they came out in the black. So,
And this year, we're a little bit ahead.
right, and they did take care of some old debts. There was a bankruptcy that you had to absorb,
Yep.
and they were able to do that on their own, and they didn't have to come back to the city for subsidies.
That's good to know, and my confidence is starting to get regained with the management
you.
of that department.
It's good.
On hearing that news, I hope it continues.
We do, too.
It'd be nice to, I know we get a final report every year on how the enterprise accounts have done, but it'd be good to know what is a surplus in that budget for future years. Thank you.
I think it's important, too, to recognize that some of the things that we're doing today, we're really trying to set the groundwork for the big ticket items coming down the road. 3 years from now, we're going to be looking at some pretty significant expenses, right? The runway portion, the reconstruction of that main runway, it's probably a $10 million project. So there's some significant expense that's going to be incurred there. And we're trying to position ourselves so that we're able to cover big chunks of that.
Councilor Bean?
I just want to say, if you look around the state, there are some of these airports that aren't putting money in, like Southbridge, which, you can't get fuel there. Their restaurant now is thinking about closing. Their runway's out of shape, so there's going to be need for places like Fitchburg, Fitchburg Orange. There are just a few of us that are doing well and maintaining. And by doing that, you're going to be able to create more revenue and bring a larger crowd in there, hopefully maintain.
And that's really what we're trying to do. I mean, we're really trying to look at the airport as an asset to the city, as that kind of an economic driver, so that when we think about what can we do differently, what can we do to bring more people in, to base more people at it, drive the tie-downs, drive the fuel sales, to really start kind of turning that corner. Because you're absolutely right. I mean, when you look at the airports in Massachusetts, very few airports are self-funding. I think the last time I looked, there's only 2 or 3 of us that actually self-fund. Everybody else is getting, basically subsidies from whatever their local entity, and we're trying not to do that.
Any other questions for the Airport Commission? Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.